channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Saturday, you guys. For today's video, I finished up some projects with kind of a spring theme and only using two colors of DIY paint, a light and a dark for all three projects. So that was kind of a fun little experiment. Anyway, I hope you guys like them, and without further ado, let's get to today's video. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, I am only using two colors of paint for this video. And since I had these two little bitty bunnies that I picked up recently at the Goodwill, I thought I would go ahead and use those two paint colors to give them a little bit of a makeover. So I'm using Crinoline on the first bunny and Weathered Wood on the second. And I am pouncing or stippling the paint on rather than trying to brush it on, just to avoid brushstroke marks. Now with the Weathered Wood one, I did have to go over it a few different times in places. It is so hard with Weathered Wood to tell if the paint is just wet or if you actually missed a spot. So there were a few spots that I had to go over and retouch on the little bunnies. Now, since the original color of the bunnies was white, the Crinoline gave me a little less trouble, and I only had to put two coats on that particular bunny. You can see there I'm just using my hair dryer to help speed up the process of painting them. And then once I had them completely painted and they were dry, I went ahead and went in to seal my paint. And for that, I am going to be waxing them with DIY's clear wax to start. And I'm just applying a nice even coat to each of the little bunnies and then using a dry shop towel to very gently wipe back any excess wax. Now, I could have stopped here and they would have been just fine, a little plain, but fine. But in the end, I decided to go in with contrasting waxes on each of these little rabbits to just bring out the little bit of detail each one of them has. Now for the Crinoline bunny, I'm going to be using DIY's black wax, and I'm not going to be putting an entire coat of black wax all over the rabbit. I'm just using a little artist brush to put it in places that there is already some detail to bring that detail out. So around its little eyes, in its ears, around its feet, along its legs, and around its tail. And as I'm adding that little bit of black wax, I'm just using, again, a dry shop towel to wipe back the excess. And since I already have a coat of clear wax on this rabbit, it's a lot easier to remove a good portion of that black wax. Once I was done with the Crinoline bunny, I moved on to the little Weathered Wood bunny, and for this one, I'm using DIY's white wax to go into all of the detail. These were such a simple makeover, you guys, but I absolutely love how they came out, and I hope you guys do too. Now I've been looking for an excuse to use some of the new Decor polys by Redesign with Prima, and I saw a beautiful project that Erin over at the Provincial Farmhouse had done that was kind of similar to this, and so that is my inspiration for this particular project. I have had this frame for a long time, you guys. This actually came out of my garage. I found it when we were moving, and I am just starting off with giving it a coat of Weathered Wood. Now, as I said before, we're only using two different colors of paint on this. So my base coat is going to be this beautiful Weathered Wood color. Thankfully, since the original color of this frame is so close to the weathered wood, I only had to go over it with one good coat of paint, but you can see here I am really working to make sure that that paint gets down into all of the details of this frame. Then I let it dry completely before I took it outside to give it a coat of sealer. I'm just using a Rustoleum 2X matte top coat on this, and the reason that I'm sealing it is because I know I want to distress it, and I don't want to accidentally distress down through the weathered wood to the original color. Now, as I'm sure you've already guessed, I am going over the weathered wood with DIY's Crinoline. I am not trying to get perfect coverage here because I am going to be distressing this pretty heavily, but I'm putting 2 coats of paint on it just so that my crinoline paint is nice and bright. Now, of course, one of the beautiful things about DIY paint is the ability to wet distress. So I am just using a damp shop towel to go over the details in this piece and wipe back some of that crinoline paint to reveal that beautiful weathered wood color from underneath. Once I'm done with the distressing, I let my frame completely dry again, and then I'm going in to seal my paint. And again, for this, I'm using DIY's clear wax and my soft bristle brush to just apply a really good even coat all over this frame. Once I have the clear wax applied, I am wiping back the excess with a dry shop towel. I'm not being really heavy-handed here, just a light wipe to get rid of any clumpy excess wax. Once I have a good base coat of the clear wax down and wiped back, I am going in with DIY's black wax to give this some age, a little bit of grunge, and to really make those details stand out. Now, I know this look isn't for everyone, and that is okay, but I am just trying to kind of replicate what I saw Erin do that I thought was pretty cool. And so I'm trying to give this a very kind of French country, old world, grungy patina. Now, since I already have a coat of the clear wax down, the black wax isn't really staining the paint too heavily, which is nice, but anywhere it gets a little darker than I'd like it, I just take my clear wax brush and go back over that area with a little bit of clear wax and then re-wipe it to remove a little bit more of that black wax. The final step for the frame is just simply cleaning up the back, and since DIY paint is water-based, it's really easy to just take a damp shop towel and clean up the paint from the back of this frame. Once my frame was clean, I went ahead and set it aside and started working on the art that would go into it. For that, I grabbed this piece of the Decor Poly set called Petals in Harmony. This set comes with 4 beautiful florals, and I chose this one in particular, and I'm using the same procedure on this Decor Poly that I did with the frame. I'm starting with a good coat of weathered wood, giving it a seal with that spray sealer. And once that's done, I am dry brushing some crinoline paint over the weathered wood. And to apply the crinoline paint, I'm using a little chip brush, and I'm just dipping the tips of the bristles into the crinoline and then wiping a lot of that paint back off of the brush onto a dry shop towel. I'm building it up in layers so that some of that weathered wood is still shining through that crinoline paint in the details of this piece. Once I'm happy with how my paint job looks, it is on to sealing it. And again, I'm just using a coat of clear wax first, applying that with my brush, and then very gently dabbing the excess wax off of mostly just the high places on this little applique. Then, as I did with the frame, I'm going in with some DIY black wax over the details in this flower, and I am using my dry shop towel to just wipe back the excess. Anywhere that it's a little too grungy, I simply grab my clear wax brush and go over that area to lighten it up a little bit, and then I use the dry shop towel again to wipe back the excess. Once I was finished with the applique, it was time to work on the background for it. I am starting with a piece of watercolor paper cut to size, and then I am just going over that watercolor paper with a coat of crinoline paint, and then letting that dry completely before I go ahead and seal it. And again, for the sealer, I am just using that Easy Spray Sealer by Rustoleum. Now, I felt like this needed a little something more, so I ended up grabbing out this stencil that I have. This one's called Anisa. It's by Redesign with Prima, and I am taking some weathered wood paint and a stencil brush, and I am wiping almost all of the paint off of the stencil brush so it's very dry, and I'm going in with a very, very light coat of that weathered wood over the stencil to just give a very subtle background for my piece. I sealed my stencil with the same Rustoleum clear matte spray, and then it was on to adding my applique to my backer board. So I'm just using some Titebond Quick and Thick and spreading that out with a little paintbrush to make sure I've got good coverage before I glue it down. And I wanted to also mention I did add a piece of cardboard backer to this piece of paper for a little more stability. Then I just set a couple paint cans on this and let it dry. Lastly, it's time to reassemble my frame, and then this little project is done. I absolutely love the neutral spring look of this, and I hope you guys like it too. So here is the before shot of this project. I completely forgot to take any video of it before I got started or while I was sanding the words off, you guys. So sorry about that. But here I am getting started on painting it once I had it all sanded and cleaned back up again. I'm starting with crinoline, and I'm doing almost a dry brush technique. I would call this kind of a heavy-handed dry brush, I guess. And the reason being is I wanted good coverage, but I didn't want heavy coverage. I just wanted a nice, light, even coat of that crinoline paint so that you could still see a little bit of the graining and some of those knots shining through the crinoline paint. And then rather than going over this entire thing with a second coat of paint, I just went over it in areas to add a little bit more depth to the crinoline paint. Next up, I am going to be adding some weathered wood to the top of this sign, and I'm going to be using a dry brush technique. So I'm barely dipping the tips of this chip brush into my paint, and then I'm wiping almost all of that paint back off of my brush. And then just using a very light touch, I'm going across each board individually, trying to get that paint to pick up onto the grain of the wood, and then using it a little bit more heavily around the edges and on the corners to add a little bit more shadowing. I just went over different places on the board until I was happy with how it looked. And once I was finished with that, it was time to move on to my transfers. For this sign, I'm using up the rest of the pieces of one that I've had in my stash for a little bit, called An Afternoon in the Garden. I absolutely love this set. So I cut all the flowers out and then spent some time arranging them on my sign just so that I had an idea where I wanted them all to go. And with transfers, since they can be layered, you want to start with whatever your background is going to be and then work forward from there. So I'm starting with the larger flowers that are going to be in the back of my quote unquote garden on this sign. And as you could see there, I had to cut where the board had a gap in it, and then I'm just tucking the extra pieces of transfer into that gap. So I got my first flower down, and then I am just going to work my way across the board. I'm placing my two largest flowers on this side down first, and then I'm using my transfer stick to rub those transfers down as I peel back that piece of vellum. It's a very easy process. And once I have my larger flowers down, I will work on building up from there, putting some smaller flowers on top of those, and so on. Finally, it's time to add some words to my sign, and I am going to be adding one of my favorite sayings, and that is, "Where flowers bloom, so does hope." Now I'm starting with the word hope, making sure that it's centered, and then I'm picking up the letters with a piece of backer board, and then I am inking those up with Stazon permanent black ink. Then I lay the backer board back down and gently press those letters down into my board so that they leave a really good impression. Once I had the hope applied, it was pretty simple to apply the rest of my words using the same procedure, just picking them up with that backer board, inking them up, and then laying them back down and pressing them down into the board. Now, for whatever reason, I was really struggling getting those letters to actually stick to my backer board, and I ended up having to break out my spray glue and glue them into place just so that I didn't accidentally drop one onto my sign and have it smudge. I was so happy to have everything stamped, you guys. Once that was finished, it is finally time to just seal up my paint. And again, going for the DIY clear wax and just applying a nice even coat over the entire sign. And then I'm going to wipe that back with a dry shop towel. I absolutely love how this sign came together, and I hope you guys like it as much as I do. That is it from here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my projects and I hope you enjoyed today's video. What did you think of using just two colors to create spring decor. I know the transfers definitely helped liven up the sign a little bit, but I also really kind of like the more subtle neutral feel of the other two items as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you liked today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry DIY paint and products, as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, as well as some Recycled Treasures decoupage papers and some Redesign with Prima. And even though I don't currently have the maxi size transfer that I used in today's video, I do have the larger tube transfer. I have one of those left in my web shop. So if you're interested at all, check that out there. And then let's see, for Wednesday's video, I am working on a little console table. I'm really hoping to have that done for you guys for Wednesday's video, so fingers crossed. If not, my husband and I are going out on another junk run tomorrow, so maybe between what we got last week and this week, it might be a thrift haul if I can't get the little table done. So stay tuned. Either way, I'll have something fun for you guys on Wednesday. Anyway, until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend and beginning of the week. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.